Hello, malt mates. Welcome to the bothy, the whiskey bothy. So it's not any old bothy. Not this bothy. This is quite a specific purpose bothy because it's where I review whiskey and other quality spirits on YouTube so as to share my personal experience of whiskies I've bought and paid for to perhaps inspire you either to buy them or to avoid them, right? We always have the option and we must always keep control of our options. So I'm going to review something a little bit unusual. This is not something we see very often in Scotch whisky. It's a cask strength, or high strength, that's better, high strength traditional blended Scotch. It's James Eadie's X. It's been bottled at 57.1%, which is 100 proof. And it is a batch 1 to be specific, which is got 1,800 bottles from an assortment of casks. And some of the casks have been transferred into fresh sherry casks to lift them for the blend. There's no statement as to whether it's purely the single malt content or in fact the grain content, because this is a blended Scotch. It's not single or blended malt. I've been thoroughly enjoying it because it's a little bit different, and I find that during the summer months, which is the moment I'm recording this review and the time that I've been sipping away at this whiskey over the last 3 to 4 weeks, during the summer, I just like to have a more relaxing style of whiskey, which is less demanding. The heavy, big hitting whiskies, the sherry monsters, the peat monsters, I tend to prefer them more when the weather is cooler and it's not quite so bright and sunny. Now, I have to add, this is a personal preference. So, welcome to review 1087. There we go. With, come here, little bottom, that's better. Lovely. Here he is. One of the bothy regulars. This is Billy Bundle, Billy the cat. They know every single time. They can read my mind. I don't question it too much because I don't want to frighten myself. But I shall now share my opinions. Oh, right, you little brat. You're right. I know what's happening here. Right. Give me a minute. Of course, I'm endorsing his behaviour by doing this, by giving him rewards, but I can't help it, because when it comes to cats, I'm indisciplined and weak, right? I am putty in their paws and I can't help myself. It's just the way it is. Right. First impressions, on the nose. It's a malt monster. Right, and it's not just the strength at 57.1. There's a lot of intense maltiness going on here. The sherry hit is offset by some quite ripe grain complex components here. The fusion of the single malts and the grain, that's the single malts from pot still and the grain whiskey, which is mixed mash bill, just like bourbon, but slightly different, but more or less the same, from column stills, is really beautifully intermeshed. So the first impression on the nose, if you were to give this to one of your malt mates, absolutely blind, and not tell them what it was, they'd start to think it was a single malt. Now, before I go any further, a little bit of background about James Eadie as an independent bottling company. And if you're looking for this malt, you'll certainly find it in the UK. It's about £40 a bottle, which is a very competitive price for the strength of the alcohol, bearing in mind that in the UK, the level of taxation on strength of alcohol in the bottle is absolutely extortionate and totally exploitative. There we go. I've got that out the way. Let's swiftly move on. I tasted this in the shop where I bought it. It's one of these taste and try before you buy, because I was a little bit sceptical. But, in fairness, quite a number of the independent bottlers are putting out cheaper, independent calibre bottlings. I'm thinking of Dumbarton, which is a version from Dramore. North Star have something similar. A lot of the Thompson brothers certainly do this style of whisky very successfully, because it's all, and a lot of the success is down to the hands-on management of the casks, which are being done as small batches. And when you've got fewer casks involved, the integrity of the composition tends to be more intact and dynamic. There is such a thing, and I've tasted it in the past frequently, where you can overblend a whisky, where you can have 100 different malts in a blend with grain, and there's nothing to show. It's just a white noise of malt confusion. You'll soon pick up on that in your whisky travels. But this, the company started back in roughly about the 1850s. So in fact, it is the rebirth, the regeneration of a very old whisky company, which originally started as a brewery in England, in which they were very successful. And the company have kind of resurrected in recent years the legacy, the historical, legitimate legacy of this brand, which first appeared on the shelves of greengrocers and licensed grocers back in 1856, roughly. So this has got some antiquity to it. That, by the way, is really irrelevant to us. It's just something to add in passing, because ultimately it's the actual quality of the whisky that matters. Are we getting a good return for the price we've paid for the bottle? I know I'm not going to expect a single malt experience. Blended whisky has a different style to it, a different texture, a different mouthfeel, a different consistency, because you've got grain whiskies involved from column stills. So you've got that finer spirit, which will also, by the way, affect the appearance of Scotch mist, because there is far more reflux and refinement in column still distillation, so that you do not have the essential oils coming through from the ingredients, which tend to be malted barley, wheat and corn. Very similar to many American bourbons. There's a lovely, rich and slightly sappy wood note appearing on the nose. If it was superficial, it would be bothersome, but it's not. It's really integrated into the collective experience of this whisky. And we're off to a good start. The nose itself is really quite interesting. The age, there's younger and older whiskies in here. There's a number of casks being used in this batch where they're declaring slightly cryptically on the bottom label of the bottle that they've had 1 year in new sherry casks to up the sherryness. And the 1 year is significant because that is a decent duration for the proper integration of the new sherry influence coming from these casks to make its way and maintain its status within the composite of the blend. Let's taste it. It's woody, but that woodiness is rounded by some crisp, clean citrus sherry notes. Raw, in other words 57.1%, this whisky tastes raw. It's what you would expect, malt mates, from relatively young whiskies, because they're not going to use significantly old whiskies when they're charging £40 a bottle. So I'm now going to put in 2 teaspoonfuls in the soda spoon. It's it's a ladle. That's ladle. This is what it is. 5 millilitres per spoonful. So I've added 10 millilitres of water, and I'm just going to let it sit there for a minute or two. I'm looking at the legs, actually, good strong legs in the side of the glass, even after I've added the water. Again, they're descending quite rapidly, which is a sign of younger whisky. I would say that the blend component, as in the column still grain whisky, is relatively young, and a lot of the woodsiness is coming from that grain whisky. It just has that slight corn flavour to it. And I'd certainly say that the older single malts, which are light single malts, they're not intense, they're not heavy. We're not looking at Mortlags here. We're looking at a far lighter Speyside single malt content. And once we've given it a couple of minutes in the glass, having diluted it slightly to simply make it more accessible, let's dive in. The wood note is still prominent, but my experience is it does start to subside slightly over time. For the price you're paying, for the amount of whisky you're getting, it's pretty good. I might add, and it's important to mention this, that on the back of the label it states non-chill filtered and natural colour. That colour is coming from the casks. Now, the cynical amongst you are going to say, hey Ralphie, you can't catch us out with that one. There's nothing illegal, there's nothing wrong with adding E150A colourant to the cask before it's filled with whisky, at which point, because it's not added afterwards, it doesn't necessarily have to be disclosed. And frankly, I can't argue with that. However, you do, with experience, get to notice the presence of E150A. And I need to qualify this further by just making it clear that when E150 has been added to the casks prior to the whisky going in, that in fact it assimilates far more successfully, because you don't have the shock of the addition at the bottling plant in the stainless steel vats shortly prior to the bottling of the whisky, like you have with so many high street, supermarket and Amazon proprietary bottlings, whether they be single malts or blended. Let's go back to this again. To be clear, this isn't going to give you your amazing single malt experience. But what it is it's something interesting and more lightweight, despite the intensity of the flavour. I mentioned that rich maltiness, that strong maltiness. That woodiness is kind of in there. It's dominant initially. It will integrate, settle down as the whisky opens up. I'm just beginning to see it, only just a little bit of cloudiness appear. You probably won't notice it in the camera yet because the camera's not particularly good at picking up on it. And also, we've got quite a high ambient temperature in the bothy because it's the middle of summer here and it's been a scorching hot day. Similar temperatures, by the way, to the Caribbean in wintertime. So when it's warmer, you don't get that Scotch mist appearing as quickly. I would say that as a summertime, easygoing session dram, it's very impressive. This is one, if you're ever going to be mixing your whisky with other ingredients, say ginger cordial, for example, another example, green tea, which tends to be my favourite, although I don't do very often because I'm really, really, really old-fashioned. I just drink my whisky straight. I rarely have it mixed. But green tea, for me, particularly green tea that's prepared and then put through the soda stream, it's a thing, by the way. It works really well, especially when the green tea is Japanese matcha tea and it's nice and bitter. You want plenty of bitterness. Back to the whisky. It's had a few minutes. Let's see where it's going now. The woodiness is subsiding. It's got a little bit more charcoal in it. And with that, you're getting a little touch of smoke. The smoke is not coming from the whisky. It's coming from the charred casks. People often confuse when they detect smoke in the whisky. They think it's coming from peat. But that is not necessarily the case. You can get a lot of smokiness, particularly that sort of static smokiness, which doesn't deteriorate over time as the whisky oxidizes or ages in the cask. Then that is due to the smokiness that's been locked in where the wood in the cask has been charred using a massive industrial blowtorch. Now we're getting somewhere. The wood's subsiding. There is a delightful, soft, biscuity bitterness appearing. At this point, the whisky is genuinely starting to take its mature shape in the glass. It's no longer got that rawness and that heat from the strength of the alcohol at the first pour, because we're about 12-15 minutes into the review. So at this point, particularly in higher temperatures, where the whisky in the glass will do what it does faster, because the ambient temperature is higher, then we're getting the more complexity, we're getting more intensity of sensation. It is quite an intense dram altogether. It's a busy one. It's a big bruiser that's really delivering quite a soft, rounded experience. It's very much the character of a malt delivered in a blend. It's what we would expect from blends. That sort of fusion of the flavours, the intermingling, the meshing of the flavours, the textures, and the whole experience. It's now happening for real. It's taking the whisky in quite a positive direction, and it's certainly improving it. At this point, you can tell it's more of a blend and less of a malt, because that initial high strength, not cask strength, slightly reduced from cask strength, that's initial high strength, 100 proof strength, it's been brought down a little bit, and therefore the whisky's just showing more of its actual true nature. I'm adding more water. One more spoon will do. We're getting sultana notes, a little bit of sour cherry, some mild almond in the background. The bitterness is simply delightful, because I think, in my opinion, the bitterness is coming from the malts, but it's being rounded off by the blend content. This, I have to say, is a very well composed whisky. It has been subtly and carefully blended, and it's not been constructed in a hurry. This has been assimilated wonderfully well. It wouldn't surprise me if at James Eadie, because they do have their own warehouses, if they haven't been basically taking the number of casks for this batch, emptying them out into the silo, into the stainless steel vat, right? Letting it blend up together and then putting it back into the individual casks, so that essentially this blend is pre-blended in the casks prior to going to the bottling plant and just sitting prior to being put into the bottles. My final conclusions before I deliver a blend mark. It's well worthwhile. I think this represents good value for the money. I think it is of interest to single malt drinkers because it is a very small batch, blended Scotch, which has been pitched at whisky sippers, pitched at people who know about whisky. It is not a high street, heavily advertised blend. independent bottlers, particularly small ones like James Eadie, that's not their field of vision. They know that their customers are whisky educated people, are people who are open to being educated at the high street specialist retailers where they go to buy their bottles of whisky. This, and I want to remind you about this, it's important. This is why, for the prosperity of Scotch whisky's reputation and delivery in the future, even if we're paying a small premium, we all need to be shopping at the small high street specialist whisky retailers wherever we are. Especially the ones who actually take a genuine and legitimate concern for what they stock and an interest in the customers they're selling to. And that's us. One more taste before the blend mark. Where's my blend bucket? Here it is. I'll be using this shortly. The nose, the woodiness is subside. It's more a little bit sawdust. It's beautifully integrated. It's nicely done. It's not jarring. It's not grating. It's balanced, but it's still prominent. The maltiness is subsiding a little bit. There's fruitiness coming through. As I mentioned, sultana, slightly rich sultana, almost plum sultana. I've added more water. Lovely mouthfeel. There's a hint of mist appearing, but not much. If this was winter time, there'd be more. Crisp, clean, ripe plums. The cherry note, the cherry stones, bitter cherry or sour cherry, even better, sour cherry. In the background, subtle, understated, delicate. A lot going on for a relatively simple old school blended Scotch, which was very typical of the old days. But we don't see so much now because the modern consumer doesn't like to get their palate shocked, malt mates. They're not like us. They're not invested. And therefore, I understand that the big companies, the big main brands, they have to dilute the product to make them palatable for the lazy palate. It's an opinion. Hey, it's just an opinion. Aye, goodness, I love the internet. What am I going to give this? Blend mark 83. Competent. It's not outstanding, but it's satisfying. It's not expensive, and it's authentic. And there you have it. That's really all I have to say. If you want to join me for the second part, really, which is 1087 extras, which will be coming along shortly, I'm really going to be talking about the way smaller whisky companies reach out to us now in a way that really didn't happen, and how the internet really is the game changer. Because it's creating a meeting point, a meeting in the middle point, which is actually changing the Scotch whisky landscape. Join me.